Good morning. Welcome to our MDC meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order at 10:01. So before we get started on the agenda items, unfortunately, shortly after our January meeting, we did, or I guess I should say we officially appointed Dr. Fowler to the MDC following the Veterinary Medical Board meeting. And shortly thereafter, he did have to resign from the MDC. So we are going to be once again looking for a veterinarian member to join us on the MDC, and the VMB is calling a special meeting in a couple weeks, organizing a meeting for May in order to go over applications and do interviews so that hopefully we can have a new member in place starting in July.
Can we call the roll?
Yes. If Jessica, if you can please call the roll.
Mr. Feld?
Here.
Dr. Sullivan?
Here.
Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
Dr. Lazarev? Dr. Lazarev, I believe, is absent for now and will join us shortly. Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Sequoia?
Here.
Ms. Estri?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So the next item will be our public comment on items not on the agenda. If there's anyone in the room who would like to introduce themselves or make any comments? Seeing none, moderator, can we please open this to the online forum?
All right, and before I open up public comment, I just wanted to make a note that Dr. Lazarev is now on the WebEx call. All right.
I am. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. All right, so this is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Okay, so the next agenda item will be review and approval of the January 24th, 2023 meeting minutes. Does anybody on the committee have any comments or changes? Dr. Bradbury?
I don't have any changes, but I do have a comment. After reading through that, I was reminded of how much work we put into that whole legislative package, and it's kind of a bummer it didn't get picked up, but we have a lot. We've advanced things in a way that I don't think we could have without that degree of discussion. So, and I also realize that sometimes I don't make sense when I'm talking. I was reading over some of my comments, and I apologize for that. So I didn't have any changes.
No worries. We're just going to pause for a technical break. Oh, we're good to go now. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bradbury. Anybody else with any on the committee comments, changes? No. Seeing none, is there any public in the room that has any comments or corrections for the meeting?
Before we take public comment, can we get a motion, please?
Oh, sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Bradbury.
I'll second.
Jennifer. Thank you. We now have our motion. Sorry about that. If there's any public members in the room who would like to make any comments on this? All right, I don't see any. Moderator, can you please open this for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right.
Okay, can we please call the roll for the motion?
Ms. Chappelle?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lazarev? Dr. Lazarev? Dr. Lazarev, you may be muted if you're speaking.
Yes, sorry. I
Oh.
got two buttons to push. It's yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Estrie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So moving on to our next agenda item, we will be the update discussion and potential recommendations for a rulemaking package regarding minimum standards for alternate veterinary premises. Dr. Sullivan and Marie.
Okay, thank you. The minimum standards for alternate veterinary premises this has been a never-ending project. The background section of the memorandum gives a detailed chronology of where we were in 2018 with a new regulatory package before the board that was approved, and the attempts to clarify the language, especially in the existing section 2030.3 small animal vaccination clinics. I assume that everyone has read the background material, and it is important information, but I'm going to read the discussion section because it goes into depth as to how OAL works and why the subcommittee, staff, and stakeholders are recommending the changes that that are being proposed. During the January 2022 board meeting, concerns were raised with the pending rulemaking language specific to vaccinations and when and how the VCPR must be established. In addition, the regulatory text was submitted to the Department of Consumer Affairs, Legal Affairs Division's Regulations Unit for review. Part of the process to amend and add regulations is reviewed by the Office of Administrative Law to ensure that an agency regulation meets standards set by the law in the Administrative Procedures Act. These include whether the regulation is necessary, the agency has statutory authority to adopt, amend, or repeal a regulation, the text is clear and easily understood, the regulation is consistent with existing statutes, court decisions, or other provisions of law, the regulation provides reference to the statute, court decision, or other provisions of law that the agency implements, interprets, or makes specific by adoption, amending, or repealing the regulation, and the regulation is not duplicative of a state or federal statute or other regulation. Over the past 10 years, OAL has increased its scrutiny of regulatory proposals regarding the exact meaning of every word, particularly for clarity and necessity. In addition, the APA requires each regulatory amendment, addition, or repeal to be explained in the rulemaking package as part of the initial statement of reasons document that is filed with the proposed regulatory text. The detailed information that is in the memorandum will provide the language for the initial statement of reasons, and therefore, when the board approves the rulemaking package, it is ready to go. Following the regulations unit's review of the rulemaking previously adopted by the board's regulatory council recommended significant changes to the text, primarily to remove duplicative text in the proposed regulations. Accordingly, the board the executive officer and subcommittee formed a working group to do the wordsmithing necessary to prepare a rough draft for the MDC. In addition to the board staff, legal counsel, and the subcommittee, the working group also included CBMA representatives. On behalf of the subcommittee, Marie and I would like to thank our new attorney from DCA's Legal Affairs Division, Christy, our staff, Jessica and Timothy, our attorney, Tara, and Grant and Dan from CVMA for the many hours of wordsmithing to get the draft ready for today. By many hours, I am talking about 4 or 5 Zoom meetings of 2 to 4 hours. I guess one of them even lasted 6 hours. So it was very detailed and I hope very productive by what you see today. Given the regulation unit's recommendation to make significant changes to remove duplicative language in the minimum standards for alternate veterinary premises proposed regulatory text, the attached regulatory text is restructured to remove duplicative text. We changed some titles and changed the format to make Section 2030 the standard that generally applies to every practice type. Then we list and describe each practice type and add sections that are unique to them and make a list of those sections in 2030 that don't apply to them. We made global changes to reference all facilities as veterinary premises and made the global change of his or hers to their. Any additional comments from Marie or staff before we begin?
I'd also like to thank our former Regulations Unit Counsel, Karen Halbo. She was also very instrumental in providing the foundation of the restructure, and then we used that as a foundation to build from. So we're really excited that we have Christy on our team, but I also wanted to thank Karen for her work on it.
That's great, thank you. I would recommend following along on page 3 of the memorandum. A lot of the details in this part of the memorandum is for the initial statement of reasons. You will also need to kind of go back and forth between the regulations themselves and the description. So specifically, we are going to recommend the following, and I'm on the bottom half of page 3. We're going to propose the title to remove the word fixed so that Section 2030 has a new title, quote, minimum standards, veterinary premises, unquote, to reflect the consolidation of minimum standards for all veterinary premises in this section. Secondly, a new introductory sentence, all veterinary premises shall maintain the minimum standards set forth in this section unless otherwise specified. And the third is we took the existing introductory paragraph and moved it to paragraph A1 of Section 2030. What I'm going to do is take sections like this, in this case, the bottom of page 3, and see if there's any comments, questions, or input, and then we'll kind of go page by page. So I'll open it up for any comments from the committee. Tara.
This is Tara Welch, Board Counsel. So this is for board staff when they're preparing the rulemaking if it passes out of the MDC and the board for approval to initiate a rulemaking. On page 3, it notes the title change, which is minimum standards - veterinary premises. I just wanted to make a note that on the proposed text, page 1 of 13, it's attachment 1. It looks like the dash accidentally got stricken. So when board staff prepares the text for submission, that dash needs to be maintained in the title of 2030, so it'll say minimum standards - fixed veterinary premises.
Yeah, it'll just say veterinary premises.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Open it up to the public in the room. Moderator, could you open it up to the public online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Please. Okay, moving on to page 4, we changed the definition of indoor lighting to be more generalized. A subsection A5C adds clarity that signage to satisfy this paragraph shall be posted, I quote, at the entrance, unquote, of the veterinary premises to avoid confusion over where a conspicuous sign must be posted. And we moved A of subsection 2030.1 from small animal fixed to a new paragraph 6, subsection 6 of section 2030 with modifications for when and how the exercise should be provided with different species and varied medical conditions. We did that because we felt that it fit into 2030 better than it did into 2030.1. Any comments or questions from the committee? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you open the online for any comments?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Thank you. Okay, on page 5, paragraphs A7 and A8 address 2 different scenarios how a client must receive general information when calling the veterinary premises and information about normal business hours and name, phone number, and address of any after-hour emergency veterinary premises. Any questions on subsections A7 and A8? We did spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out all of the scenarios that that information needed to be gotten to the public and what that information should be. Any comments from the committee? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you open WebEx for any comments from the public?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Next page, actually we're going to do page 5 and 6. Paragraphs A, 9 through 18 are the same except for updating some language. For example, subsection A12 was revised to make it clear as to what is available today. For consistency, the same language is used in A13, subsection A13. In subsection A14, the word stored is used for consistency with state and federal law. And in A17 is making the language, is just making the language more current. We removed the old paragraph A19, which was the requirement that a veterinary premises had to be able to deliver oxygen in case of emergency because now it is covered in the new paragraph A19, which requires all veterinary premises to have appropriate drugs and equipment needed for emergencies, which would include equipment to deliver oxygen, if applicable, for that veterinary premise type. We moved paragraph B7, the section on the aseptic surgery, to A20 because it needed to be more inclusive of all areas of the veterinary premises. It is regarding the requirement that all floors, doors, tabletops, countertops, and window coverings shall be non-porous. Any questions on page 6 and the top of page 7 for the committee? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, you can open WebEx to see if there's any comments from the public, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. In section 2030B, we removed paragraph 1A because it was no longer relevant. The rest of this section remains pretty much unchanged. Section 2030.05 had a few technical changes. Section 2030.1 has a change in definition that makes it clear that it is a, quote, building, unquote, and adds, quote, or exotics, unquote, to the household animals. Paragraph A adds all of the section, adds all of section 2030, and paragraph B is unchanged except for changing the word carcass to the word body. Section 2030.15 is a new section with the same definition of the previously approved draft and states that paragraph 10 of section 2030 is exempt from this veterinary premises, and that is related to temperature and ventilation control. Any questions from the committee on page 7 and top of page 8? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you open WebEx to see if there's any comments from the public?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Thank you. In section 2030.2, we have combined all types of mobile veterinary premises, which includes all types of vehicles that serve as veterinary premises. The definition for this section is more encompassing than the previous versions. It also repeals sections A 1 through 6, B 1 through 5, C, and D. Now that is of the old proposed regulations. As you can see, the lines are crossed through it in those regs. The requirement for hot and cold water would be relocated to new subsection C, and the requirement for a 110-volt power source for diagnostic equipment would be struck as unnecessary because due to the existence of power inverters for 12-volt battery-operated equipment and access to outside services, it was felt that it was not needed. The new paragraph A is more inclusive as to what information must be provided to clients, as to contact information, hours of operation, and information for after-hour emergency care. Any questions from the committee on page 8? Any questions from the public in the room? Operator, if a moderator, I should say, if you could open WebEx to see if there's any comments from the public.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on the All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Thank you. Now, continuing on the next page related to 2030.2, paragraphs B and C relate to a full-service small animal mobile vehicle that a client and patient can enter. Paragraph B is the same requirements that are in 2030.1. Paragraph C requires hot and cold water and provides exemptions of paragraph 3 related to reception area and office, and subsection 8 related to postage signage of section 2030. Paragraph D lists the exemption of a small animal house call veterinary premises to section 20 through the 2030, and they are subsections 3, 4, 8, and 10. I'll just quickly reference them. I think I have it here. 3 is relating to reception area and office. 4 is relating to a separate exam room. 8 is relating to the requirement of posted signage outside or immediate adjacent to the primary entrance. And 10 is related to temperature and ventilation control. Any questions on the remainder of section 2030.2? Let's see, I guess I did not finish that, did I? There was also paragraph E, lists the exemptions to section 2030, which is for equine and or food animals and livestock veterinary premises. And they are removing from section 2030 are subsections 3, 4, 8, 10, and 15. And related to 15 is the method of disposal of deceased animal is removed from the large animal section. Now, are there any questions on the remainder of 2030.2 from the committee? From members of the public in the room? Moderator, you can open WebEx and see if there's any public comment from there.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please, thank you. Section 2030.3 is retitled as Animal Vaccination Veterinary Premises. Paragraph A better defines the purpose and meaning of this type of veterinary premises. Paragraph B defines quote, designated veterinary personnel, unquote, which is needed for this section. Paragraph C1 would require the minimum standards of section 2030 and then lists the exemptions of section 2030, which are subsections 3, 4, 8, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 18. And I'll just have you reference back to 2030 for those. Subsection C2 states the requirement that a veterinarian must be always on the premises to oversee the recommendations of those they supervise and to evaluate the health of the animals, answer any questions that the clients may have, and treat any emergency cases that may arise. Subsection C, C through G, and I and L are removed because they are duplicative and unnecessary. This paragraph also lists the minimum requirements for the area to be clean and sanitized. In D4, it states that what and how information must be provided to the clients about a telephone number of the business, hours of operation, and telephone number, and location of the veterinary premises that can handle an after-hour emergency. And finally, the veterinary must identify themselves to the public by posting a copy of their license. Any questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you ask the public on the WebEx to see if they have any comments or questions?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. And that concludes my presentation.
So members, if they're, go ahead.
I had some questions. Thank you for all of this work, you guys. I know it was a marathon, and it clearly paid off, because this is a really concise and well-written piece of work here. So thank you very much for all of the hard work. I had questions that were not really something that you guys focused on, but since we are here, I thought I would ask about it. It was related to the, they're related to the holding of a body for 14 days and in a freezer, and it seems like this is applying to both large and small animal, which I don't think is even possible in a large animal premises. And then on the mobile premises, it doesn't specify for small animal, and it has holding the body for 14 days. And I don't, it's been there for years. I don't know that.
Okay, I
you looked at that.
If I remember correctly, I'm going to have to look back quickly, but I think that provision we only put in the small animal fixed.
So I have it on page 19 in the fixed, and that was small animal, but the large animal states, let's see here, let me see if I can, so page 19.
So if it doesn't apply to 2030.
So 2031.1, minimum standard small animal fixed veterinary premises, so 2030.1B, and then under 2030.15, minimum standards large animal fixed, it says a large animal fixed premises shall meet all minimum standards specified in 2030 except for paragraph 10 of subsection A of that section. So what is, I'm sorry, I just want to, so that's not, go ahead.
So it's not in 2030, so
I see, okay.
So it doesn't apply to the large animal fixed.
Okay, so then on page 22, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Page 22, under, let's see here on page, so page 21 is 2030.2 minimum standards mobile veterinary premises, and it does not specify small or large. I just want, and it may be that it's in here, I just want to make sure it is. And then on page 22, subsection B, sorry, I'm just going back and forth with all of the strikes through, where it says, when veterinary services are provided within or from a mobile veterinary premises and the client has not given the veterinarian authorization to dispose of their deceased animal, the veterinarian shall be required to retain the body in a freezer for at least 14 days prior to disposal. And then when the specification of mobile veterinary, the E, subsection E, a mobile veterinary premises from which veterinary services are provided to equines and/or food animals and livestock as defined in subdivisions C and D of section 4825.1. At the location shall meet all minimum standards in 2030 except for paragraphs 3, 4, 8, 10, and 15. So I just don't see an exception there.
Okay, so it's not there because it's not in 2030. So
But it's a mobile veterinary premise.
so in B, if, and I think we used the word, so we were thinking that in a mobile veterinary premises, a small animal premises, a clinic, I think someplace we referred to that.
I think we were thinking that if you're doing mobile practice, you're in contact with the client. And so if you don't have authorization to dispose of the body, then you need to store the body. But when you're speaking with the client because you're doing mobile services, at that point you would be communicating about what to do with the body. But if there's no authorization to dispose because potentially the animal was removed from where they reside, they were transported for services, and the client has not been made aware, or there's been no discussion with the client as to what to do with the body, then in those circumstances, the body would need to be maintained.
Okay, I just don't know that it's possible to maintain a large animal in a freezer.
Yeah, Section B refers to small animal mobile.
It doesn't say small animal mobile.
I thought we had that in a...
There is small animal fixed, and then for the mobiles on page 22, she's correct. There's no limitation on that requirement for small animals only. It would generally apply in those mobile premises.
I mean, for subsection B, we could just say when veterinary services are provided within or from a small animal mobile veterinary premises, and the client in that way. To me, it's unreasonable to ask a large animal mobile person to store a body.
Madam Chair.
Is that Christy?
Yes. May I speak, Madam Chair? Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, by way of introduction, my name is Christy Shield. I'm your currently assigned Regulations Counsel for the board. Nice to meet all of you. My understanding is originally this is existing requirements for a small animal. You're correct. It is existing for small animal mobile veterinary premises. And so in discussing with the committee, the subcommittee indicate they couldn't come up with a good rationale for why it wouldn't apply to all house calls, not just small animal, when the vet has possession of the animal and the client is not given the veterinarian authorization to dispose of their deceased animal. So that's why it was expanded to include other types of house calls, not just for small animal house calls and also mobile clinics. So this section, as Dr. Sullivan mentioned, was combined to include all forms of mobile provision of services. So ones where they're providing it from a mobile unit and the animal's inside the unit, and those where you're going out and doing house calls, either for large or small animals. So all these criteria in this section apply to all those different types of premises unless otherwise specified. So the existing section of sub B applies currently to only small animal mobile veterinary premises, not house calls or anything like that, just mobile premises. So in discussing this with the subcommittee, like I said, there was no rationale that we could come up with for why that standard wouldn't apply to large animal house calls for the protection of the public. So we didn't want to be in a situation legally where we were trying to explain why small animals got certain, the clients for small animals got certain provisions of care, whereas others do not. So the question for you all would be, why would we want to exempt large animal house calls? I would assume that would be the case from this provision when it's, from my understanding, and I need the professional members on the subcommittee to jump in here, that is something that can be done. That would be the question for you to resolve. I mean, that's the reason why it went this way. That I wanted to explain how this developed.
Yeah, just because you're a large animal practitioner doesn't mean that you're not treating small animals when you go on to that farm or ranch. So I think that's where we were coming from.
To me, it that makes sense, like why, kind of how it might have evolved to that, but it is completely unreasonable for us. Like, I don't think it's protecting the public. I don't think there's a way, like, to dispose of, to hold on to a cow or a horse. And I do think even if you're in contact with a client, there are times when I've been in contact with a client and working with a client where they just can't, they're so emotional, they can't make a decision about what they want to do with the body. And we've had to put that body on hold. And sometimes we can't reach them for days because who knows why, you know. So I think that there could be circumstances where a large animal practitioner goes to a farm and it's, you know, somebody's beloved horse of 35 years and they can't make a decision about what to do with it, which is, you know, probably not common, but to then expect that mobile practitioner to somehow get that body into a trailer and bring it somewhere and house it for 14 days, I think is, I don't think that's protecting the public, and I don't know that that's a reasonable expectation.
There's no obligation here to, I mean, we definitely exempted large animal practices from this.
It isn't, I don't, can you show me where, then I can move on?
No, not on this section. You're correct on this section.
Okay.
But in other sections of the large animal, we do not have that in there. As a matter of fact, I think in our discussion, we didn't even think that would come up because large animal practitioners, equine or dairy or beef, are not going to move the body after they're euthanized. That's just not part of the practice. If the committee and members of the working group want to add, you know, small animal, a small animal mobile veterinary premises on there to make it more specific, that's fine. I'm not sure it's necessary, but I'll leave that up to you.
Marie has a comment as well.
Yeah, and part of the discussion we had that isn't really represented here was that there's an entire different industry that's devoted to the rendering of those large animals. So typically in our industry, that falls on somebody else, not the veterinarians practicing the large animal medicine. So we did discuss that, but it's not very well represented in what you're seeing here.
So we've got an exception under subsection E for mobile veterinary premises from which veterinary services are provided to equines and or food animals and livestock. And then in B, it applies to veterinary services provided within or from. So B, just to clarify, there is no exemption right now for large animal practice. You know, we've provided for large animal exceptions specifically under subsection E, and that's only from which, but in those circumstances, you know, if we have justification to exclude mobile veterinary premises storing large animals, we would add that under subsection E. But right now, we would also need to pay attention to B. So in those circumstances where the mobile veterinary premises is transporting or providing veterinary services within the mobile unit to large animals, it would still apply. So we would need to take care about that. So, you know, are there scenarios where mobile units are transporting large animals and providing veterinary services within the mobile unit? Because if there's not, if that's not an impossibility, then we have a better justification to exclude that body storage requirement. But right.
Sorry, excuse me,
Go ahead,
Madam Chair, this is Christy, your Regulations Counsel. So my recollection was from the subcommittee, and please feel free to correct me, was that those mobile units from which services are provided, meaning the animals cared for and services are provided within the vehicle, this would be something that they could do. We did discuss when it's a house call and they're going out to the premise or the client's location and providing veterinary services. And the feeling at that time, my recollection was there could be situations where that occurred. But if what you're saying is there's never a situation where the standard of care would be to care for the body in that manner, then I think we'd need to amend sub B, not E. Because E doesn't cover, the minimum standards don't cover that issue for that premise. Ms. Welch, I think it would be B that we would need to be amending, like the committee member recommended, to focus on those types of services that are situations where perhaps they're being cared for within a mobile unit, or for small animal, and this is the question, for small animal house calls. So I think the committee should discuss whether the standard of care should be for all small mobile units, whether it's within or a house call, or should we only be segregating out the large animal house calls from this requirement?
Marie?
So that's the feedback I need to get from you to figure out how to change the language.
So Marie, when you go out to a large animal facility, do you not at some time, does the owner ask you to treat this dog or look at this cat or whatever that could fall under this?
Yeah, there are times where we're out there to see a herd check or something, and we do end up doing an exam on a dog.
So if that animal, if the decision was made because it was injured or something just that morning and the decision is made to euthanize that animal, would it not be possible that as a large animal ambulatory, you may take it back to the hospital, the body?
You might. I mean, the experience that I have is maybe a little bit different in that it's a mixed animal practice. So we do both, so it's not uncommon for us to be dealing in that. If it were a sole, large animal practitioner, I'm not sure what their comfort level or preparation would be for something like that.
Okay. But in a mixed animal practice, it would be possible and sometimes likely.
Correct.
Okay.
So could we go back to examining why this requirement exists? Because, you know, if we're talking about mobile veterinary practice, it's typically to provide care. If there's euthanasia, there's a discussion with the client about what the client wants to do with the body. If the animal dies while veterinary services are being rendered, what does that look like? Is there no conversation from the veterinary, the mobile unit? Wouldn't there be a conversation with the client to remove the body?
Yes.
Otherwise, why would you pick up the body and transport it somewhere because of this requirement? You know, it sounds like because this is a mobile situation, maybe we don't need to require
A storage.
the veterinarian to transport the body.
There are some mobile facilities that all they do is euthanasia.
Yes, but
Then there's a discussion as to what they want, and as Christina said, sometimes the owner hasn't made a decision right then, and that body needs to be stored until they make a decision.
do
But
we
is
need
it-
to tell them to store it?
Yeah.
I mean,
And
this looks like the client hasn't been notified the body, the animal expired. That's what this language looks like. The client has not given the veterinarian authorization to dispose.
yeah, that actually, I think is not that uncommon where people are like unsure, because there's more than one way to dispose of the body. Some people want to bury it. There's some cemeteries. There's different ways of preserving bodies, and that can even be done with horses. So there are some ways other than the typical rendering that we think of, especially for large animals. But people don't always know right away and have that decision made. That being said, is it really on the veterinarian to, hold the body, like for 14 days? I agree that this is a strange requirement. I'm not sure that and particularly in a mobile practice, I think that people who go out and perform euthanasia, if they are not providing that, people aren't going to, use them, I think. But
What if we made it conditional so that it's if the veterinarian removes the body and the client has not given instruction as to disposal, then the veterinarian shall hold the body for 14 days. That way, it's the veterinarian from step one can say, no, I'm not taking the body. You're going to need to make other arrangements. But it also provides the client enough time to, please go ahead and remove the body, and, now I have 14 days to tell you what I want you to do with it. So, it sets up more of an agreement between the client and the veterinarian, what's going to happen.
yeah, and then there's no requirement that the veterinarian has to remove the body.
Right, for those scenarios where this looks like the veterinarian would have to remove a large animal pending the client's authorization to dispose of the
Correct,
body.
yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
So Christy, what are you thinking about a potential scenario to clarify the circumstance?
Okay, well, so this would be scaling back the existing requirement, because the existing requirement says that in all cases, when there's been no authorization for small animal, then they have to store. So this would be a scaling back to only when the client has authorized removal and transfer that they, but have not given authorization to dispose. So there would be a scaling back from the existing requirement for small animal mobile premises. So I first of all want to make sure that the committee would understand that's what the legal effect would be of changing it to that, and make sure that you're okay with changing that standard and you think that's the standard of care for today's practice. So if you're okay with that, then what we'd be doing would be applying that standard to all premises where mobile services are provided, whether it's in a vehicle or at a house call or farm call.
What would that,
So is everyone okay with that? Because I want to make sure you're understanding what we would be doing if we change sub B, because that's what I would recommend revising.
let's check with, if we have any public comment and then come back to it and get some finalized wording. This is from the room.
Grant Miller, CVMA. I feel like it would probably be cleaner to just incorporate a exemption into subsection E, to just say, because that's specific to large animal and equine, that's what we're talking about, we would just exempt section B and then everything else in 2030. No.
No, as I was pointing out earlier, subsection E begins with a mobile veterinary premises from which. So we would then have to open that up to be within or from. Because if there's transport of the large animal, that's within. Otherwise, it's from on the location. So because B is within or from.
So I'm just going to extend my apologies here as the single equine veterinarian on this working group. I think Dr. Bradbury's confusion about this section is really very telling, because if we're the only ones that understand it, then it's going to be problematic. And I, as an equine practitioner, am not aware of any mobile equine veterinary practices in which the services take place. It's only from. I've seen maybe some dental units, like on occasion, that are modified trailers, but the animal's not actually in them. They're kind of under them. It's an interesting setup. But I'm not aware of any situation where the horses are getting inside a vehicle. Doesn't mean it can't happen in the future, but I think that that's what we really need to be looking at, is when we write these, when we're all gone, what do the words say? And my concern is that the words as interpreted in B may suggest that the veterinarians have some responsibility to remove this animal, which is impossible. I drive a Toyota Prius and I work out of my house. A walk-in freezer, Dr. Pasco might know because he's built a hospital that has a walk-in freezer. I am sure they cost in excess of $500,000. I do not have a forklift. I cannot transport the forklift. I cannot transport the animal in a custom vehicle that has the requirements in order to move the body of the animal. So I can tell you at least with certainty today that equine practitioners who work on an ambulatory basis, where we are getting out of our vehicle and serving animals on the farm, we would never be able to comply with this concept of retaining the body. And that was, I'm sorry, my misunderstanding in our discussions. That was not something that I came to understand when we were working through merging these together. So I think that we really do need to parse the words out a little bit more carefully. If we can't put it in E, I think we need to reword B to very clearly state that this would be for small animals as defined, or excluding large animals as defined.
So I have an idea for that, but I will wait until public comment concludes on this item.
Okay, moderator, could you ask if there's any public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it looks like we do have a request for public comment from Dr. Aldrete. Lowered their hand and now I can't find them. Oh, there we go. Dr. Aldrete,
Andretti.
you'll have, Aldretti, sorry, my apologies. You will have 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Yeah, I'm a former board member, a long time ago, and also was an equine practitioner. And I can tell you, when you go out to euthanize an animal, you don't have any facility, any way of moving that animal after you euthanize it. And you normally have made arrangements with the rendering company to be there. So when you euthanize the animal, the rendering company then can immediately move that animal off the premise. If it's an immediate situation, an emergency situation where you have to euthanize the animal, then you call the rendering company, you make the arrangements, the owner does, and then you euthanize the animal and the animal is left there. And then the rendering company comes out and picks them up and takes them away. But there's no way for most ambulatory practitioners to be able to store a body of a horse or a cow afterwards. So I hope that helps in coming to the decision. Having euthanasia of a large animal is a very traumatic thing for both the owner and usually the situation is pretty grave. So it's not an easy thing to do, and leaving the body there is probably not the best thing, but it's the only practical thing that you can do.
Thank you, Al. So what if we look at B and say, when veterinary services are provided within or from a mobile veterinary premises treating exotic or small animals, and the client has not given permission, does that resolve our problem?
I think so.
Okay, sorry, the question for me is the prior discussion was to put in if the client requested transportation or retention of the deceased animal. But if that's not what you're going with and you want to just exclude large animal house calls from this section, then you would just add when veterinary services are provided within or from a mobile veterinary premises to common domestic or exotic household animals. And so then it would only apply to small animal services to small animals.
Yeah, and that would allow the mixed animal practitioner that is going to a farm or ranch and treat a small animal and
only small animals would be subject to this section.
Right.
That's what you mean. And I'm trying to, because there were two different ideas. One was to make it conditioned upon the request of the client to take custody and retain or transport the animal, regardless of size. Another idea was to just exclude large animal house calls, mobile services altogether.
So Christy, we have Tim who is sharing the Word document version. Tim, would you mind blowing up the language that we're currently looking at? And then if Christy, if you could read your most recent suggestion about the added common domestic or exotic household animals, so everybody can see what the language looks like.
So you see in sub C where it says when veterinary services are provided within or from a mobile veterinary premises, I would drop the words to common, domestic, or exotic household animals. Well, you don't need a comma there.
No, so common, no comma, so common, domestic, or exotic household animals.
Correct. So that would cover all small animals, whether
Would you mind putting that in red? Thank you.
I like that.
That looks good. Tara? Okay. The magic happens again.
So that would mean that it would only, this standard would only apply to small animal services, whether they're within a mobile unit vehicle or a house call. That would be all that it would apply to.
Grant?
Is that everyone's understanding, or that's what you intended?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would just
Ms.
add,
Welch?
as rationale for this change, it maintains the existing requirement as applicable to small animals.
Right.
Okay.
So this would just mean that the standard would not change for mobile services. It would just continue to apply only to small animals.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the committee? Any comments from the board? I guess we don't have a motion, do we?
No motion yet.
Okay, well, let's,
There's a requested motion, and it's broken up into two parts, but it can be done in one motion.
Right.
Just whoever makes the motion, you would want to do it as amended today.
right.
Since, excuse me, so since you've made changes, I would suggest two motions. Ms. Sieferman, I would say the first motion would be to approve the text as provided in the materials with the amendment at subdivision B, of section 2030.2 to include the words "to common domestic or exotic household animals" after the words "mobile veterinary premises," so that the sentence now reads, "When veterinary services are provided within or from a mobile veterinary premises to common domestic or exotic household animals, and the client has not given the veterinarian authorization to dispose of their deceased animal, the veterinarian shall be required to retain the body in a freezer for at least 14 days prior to disposal."
Okay.
That would be your first motion, and then the others would come after.
So would someone like to make that motion?
I do. I was just trying to type in what she wanted us to say. So I have the first part. Where in the motion do you want me to say to include the words?
So I think Christy read the motion, so we just need someone to say that they move it, then we'll vote on that, and then we can move on to.
Okay, I move to make that motion.
I second it.
So for the record, we have Dr. Bradbury making the motion, and Ms. Esther beat Dr. Sequoia to it, so she seconded the motion.
Public comment?
So now we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment in the room on the motion on the table? I don't see any. Could we please open for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, can we call roll on the motion, please?
Ms. Phelps?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lazarchuk?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Estrie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and then we need a second motion. If you look at the bottom of page 11. And we would start with the words "recommend to the board approval of the proposed regulatory text and recommend all of the following actions be taken." And if you could just read from there to the end of paragraph sub 2. Or do you want me to read it? I can read it if you like.
Oh, it was just amended. Yeah. That was just to amend it, right, so now we need.
I can read all of this again. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the board approval of the proposed regulatory text and recommend all of the following actions be taken. Number one, direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. And number two, if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations as noticed for California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 2030, 2030.05, 2030.1, 2030.15, 2030.2, and 2030.3.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any public comment from those in the room on this new motion? Nope. Moderator, can we please open for online public comments?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. We can take our vote.
Mr. Phelps?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lazachev?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Estrie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Then Chair, Ms. Sieverman, this is Christy Shields. I'll be signing off unless you think you need me for anything else. This is Christy Shields, sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I think that's okay. I don't think we're discussing any more pending regulations. So thank you so much for your assistance, Christy.
Thank you. Have a good day, all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Break, what's our lunch schedule look like?
Noon is what we typically, but we can take a 15-minute break if you want to. We have to.
Here, can we do a 5-minute break?
Yeah, okay. Can we ask for a 15-minute break, please, and reconvene? I guess it's 11:13, so. 11:30? Yeah, we'll come back at 11:30. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so moving on our agenda items will be item number 5, which is going to be our proposed guidelines for veterinarian discussion and recommendation of cannabis, and that will be Drs. Bradbury and Sullivan.
Okay, the memorandum of this agenda item gives a great history of how we arrived at this task. It starts with Assembly Bill AB 2215 Cholera in 2018 that allowed veterinarians to discuss with a client the use of cannabis on an animal patient for medical purposes without the risk of disciplinary action. The bill also required the board to adopt guidelines for veterinarians to follow when discussing cannabis within a VCPR. At the board's October 9 to 11th, 2019 meeting, the board approved the, and I quote, guidelines for veterinarian discussion of cannabis within the veterinary client-patient relationship, unquote, and posted it on their website. The board revised the guidelines in January 2020 to clarify the change of deregulation of industrial hemp. AB 45 was passed in October 2021, and AB 1885 passed in September 2022. AB 1885, in AB 1885, the board was requested to update the cannabis guidelines. The background has great amount of detail in the history of the board's involvement in the development of the guidelines, but for time purposes, we need to address the subcommittee's recommendations. First, the subcommittee would like to thank Dr. Jeff Pollard and Dr. Gary Richter, along with Jessica and Tara, for their time and input in developing the new guidelines. There was considerable discussion, some of it heated, on the need to change the format of how the information was to be provided for clarity. As we go through this, I want Christina, Jessica, and Tara to jump in and comment as I make sure that we're covering it all correctly. I'm going to follow the guidelines, and we're going to go section by section. The first decision was to change the first section of the preamble and change it to an introduction to explain why this document was necessary in 2018 and the need to update it in 2022 and define for clarity the terms cannabis, industrial hemp, and CBD so that the board's licensees better understand how they can discuss and recommend those products within a VCPR. In the background section, there's a reference to AB 45 and AB 1885 was added to reflect the passage of those bills since the last version of the guidelines. Since AB 1885 requires DCC to promulgate animal product standards before cannabis products can be marketed or sold for use on or consumption by animals, a provision for this has been added. The revisions also make other technical revisions to reflect the amendments to the law in AB 1885. So let me get everything here. Where do I have? Oh, I need to take this apart. So are there any questions or discussions on the introduction? From the committee? From the public in the room? Moderator, could you ask the public online if there's any comments about the introduction section of the guidelines?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. So I have already read the changes on the background section. You can see the underline is added and the strike through are the deletions. So are there any comments from about that section from the committee members? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you open the WebEx for any comments from the public related to the background material?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. The guidelines sections also has been revised to reflect amendments to Business and Professions Code Section 4884, made by Assembly Bill 1885. In addition, the last paragraph in that section was moved from the preamble to this section. The same additions are made in the next paragraph titled Patient Evaluation and Record Keeping. There's also an added legal citation. The next paragraph relating to documentation of advice and potential risks of the use of cannabis on animals has some minor changes. In addition, one bullet item regarding DCC's promulgation of standards is proposed to be added to reflect the requirement in AB 1885, and 3 bullet items are proposed to be removed because they are no longer accurate. Any comments or questions from the committee? Any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, could you open the line for public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. The conflicts of interest in advertising sections are virtually unchanged except for adding or recommending, quote, or recommending, unquote. The industrial hemp section is changed significantly. Though the FDA has approved the use of industrial hemp products for treatment in animals, industrial hemp is no longer a Schedule I drug under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Many drugs and supplements used in veterinary medicine are not approved for use in animals by the FDA. The focus of these guidelines is on the discussion and recommendation of cannabis, and the subcommittee felt that industrial hemp is detailed sufficiently for the purpose of the above stated bills and statutory requirements. BCS voiced concern regarding including, and I quote, until the California Department of Cannabis Control propagates animal product standards, cannabis products cannot be marketed or sold for use on or consumption by animals, unquote, in 2 sections, both in background and guidelines. They are concerned that this language will be confusing to veterinarians. On one hand, the guidelines would state it is legal to recommend cannabis, while on the other hand, cannabis and hemp-derived CBD products cannot be marketed or sold for use on or consumption by animals. The subcommittee understood their point, but felt it was important to educate veterinarians about the current status of the law. The subcommittee believes it makes sense to include this verbiage in both the background and the guidelines section, as veterinarians may want to document that they have had a conversation about product labeling with the client in the animal patient medical record. Any comments or questions from the committee? Any comments or questions from the public in the room? Commentator, could you please open it for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature. I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Thank you, moderator. The last section is the definitions, abbreviations, and acronyms. All the definitions have been updated and revised for clarifications. There's no substantial changes there. But I will open it up for discussion if the committee has any comments there. And any comments from the public in the room? Moderator, you may open it up to the public to see if they have any comments.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. And that concludes my presentation of this action item. Yeah.
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so on page 4 of the memo, there is an action requested on this. So anybody that would like to make a motion?
Well, I move I move for the MDC to, wait, where am I? Make,
Recommend to the board.
I move that the MDC recommend proposed guidelines to the board, make any edits that are appropriate and entertain them. Well, I have really messed this up. I'm going to leave this up to somebody else. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to entertain a motion I would like to move to recommend to the board the adoption of the guidelines for veterinarian discussion and recommendation of cannabis within the veterinarian client-patient relationship and post them on the board's website.
Well, I'll second it then.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from anybody on the committee? Okay, I don't see any. How about from public members in the audience? Okay, moderator, can we please open this to online comments?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
May I call the vote?
Can we call the vote, please?
Ms. Chevelle?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lazarev?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia? Dr. Sequoia?
Oh, this is the moderator. Dr. Sequoia, it looks like your microphone may be muted. Let me see if I can click the request to unmute.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so Dr. Sequoia is voting yes. Ms. Estrie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. So it looks like our next agenda item then will be our update and potential recommendation regarding the RVT school program approvals and RVT program students, and that is Jennifer and myself. So as this item goes, we are the subcommittee discussing the RVT education programs and the board's RVT educational approval process. And so this has been going on in our background information for quite some time. The subcommittee has done a lot of research on looking into what other states require for veterinary technician program accreditation. We've looked into and had presentations over the last, I would say, 2 years or so from the Committee on Veterinary Technician Education and Activities, as well as the Bureau of private post-secondary education and the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges. This has come up as far as the board's mandate to accredit all California RVT programs in the state. And when we historically looked back at this issue, it does appear that there has only been one program, which was San Diego Mesa College back in 1995 that had been approved by the board, but according to our requirements, we would actually have to be every 2 years certifying every program in the state, whether they were AVMA accredited or not. So as we did research on this and found that there were other accrediting bodies looking at all of these programs, our research led us to wonder whether or not it actually gives any further consumer protection to have the VMB regulate these programs as well. So we had multiple meetings where we discussed this, and then since the time of our last meeting, we did have a stakeholder meeting just last month where we invited members of the public, stakeholders, CARVTA, the BPPE and AAVSB representatives to come together where we talked to them about our ideas of removing this board requirement for the board to certify the technician programs in the state of California and take comment on that and any suggestions. And we would like to thank everybody that came to that meeting. We did have over 50 attendees, and overall, we got very positive feedback that they were in agreement with what our subcommittee has been thinking, that we would like to remove those requirements for the RVT programs. And also during our research as members of the subcommittee, the board staff did identify an issue related to out-of-state RVT applicants with the 3 education pathways for RVTs to obtain registration through their accredited 2-year program, education, or a combination of clinical experience or alternate route, or through AAVSB's education equivalency certificate program. But it does not authorize an individual to obtain an RVT registration without completing education, though Section 68.6 provides a pathway for RVTs licensed, certified, or registered in another state to get registered in California solely through their clinical experience. So to maintain out-of-state license reciprocity, we would also recommend placing the regulation in statute and clearly identifying the experience-only pathway for RVT applicants licensed in another state. Based on our above-mentioned research, the subcommittee would recommend the MDC and the board approve the attached legislative proposal to remove the requirement for all RVT school and degree programs to be board-approved and codify the existing out-of-state RVT pathway. So starting, it looks like on page 7, we have the recommended language for making these changes. Jennifer, do you have anything else to add?
I do not. You covered everything.
Okay. So it looks like then we're looking at amending section 4841.1, and it is this we've already sent to the board, yes, for the removing of these terms? No. Yeah, okay, so this in 4841.1 is looking at having the students be supervised under the direct supervision of a California licensed veterinarian because since the students are still students, we wanted them to be at least at the same level of supervision that RVTs would be. So that's adding the word direct supervision there. And then In 4841.5, we are saying that if the accredited by the AVMA is, or the equivalent thereof, is determined to be also approved by our board. And then the next part, in Part D, is talking about the clinical-only experience for out-of-state. So if an active or unrestricted license from another state, that they can get reciprocity here with just the educational experience of the 16 hours within 24 months there. And then the last part would be the part where we where we can remove the part where the board has to approve all schools or institutions, so striking 4842.1 and 4843. Is there any questions from anyone on the committee on this, or do you need a motion first?
Go ahead. So on the text on page 7 of the meeting materials, I've got a note here that one issue to review is whether RVT students should be able to access or administer controlled substances, since the board and DEA would not be able to track the individual like under the VA CSP provisions or RVT registration. So excluding controlled substance administration may be problematic from an experience standpoint, but at the very least, I think the MDC should discuss whether or not RVT students should be able to access and administer controlled substances. And the other issue is that RVTs currently under regulation can and statute can perform drug compounding. And you may want to consider whether or not RVT students should be excluded from drug compounding in the statute. Arguably, once they are licensed as an RVT, they will then be able to get instruction on drug compounding from their supervising veterinarian pursuant to the regulatory requirements.
Yeah, from the standpoint of consumer protection, I don't think that the student should be able to administer controlled substances or do drug compounding.
I agree. To further complicate things, I would disagree. Yeah, I would only say that I think that the RVT students would be able to do that under immediate supervision of a veterinarian or RVT. But I'd like to hear what other opinions are.
Yeah, Dr. Sullivan.
From the point of administering controlled substances, Bill Gage, who was, in the Senate BNP committee, kind of, made us recognize that anybody that is administering controlled substances should have a background check. And unless the students have that while they're going to school, I don't think they should be doing it while they're still students. I don't know if they do or not. Maybe they do. If they do, then I would reconsider, but that's the reason we had to put it in for veterinary assistants.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I think in my vision of how it's happening is the RVT pulls up the controlled substance and stands there and helps the student administer it just to get the experience. The student doesn't have the controlled substance unsupervised. It's just the actual skill of it. But I would be cautious about excluding the RVT students from doing any of these skills, but I do want us to make sure that we word it correctly. So.
I guess I see what you're saying. I think it probably wouldn't take too much away from their training, since it's really just whether to give a drug slow or not, and they get that with other injectable drugs if they're not calculating and pulling it up. I guess excluding it would be probably the cleanest thing to do, to keep things uniform and the same with compounding. Although I think it would be helpful to be training them in compounding during their RVT training, I think because of the pharmacy law and the complication that we find ourselves in with pharmacy law, and we're really trying hard to keep our compounding abilities. It probably is also cleaner to exclude them from compounding and have them trained. I don't.
Yeah, at my school, the students do calculate all the controlled drugs, and then we as instructors, or the instructional lab RVT does stand there and watch them pull up the drugs, because they are learning rules of orders of pulling up drugs and things, and then they do administer them as part of their surgery labs. Though I hadn't really thought about it, something like propofol has the same effect as they give them, but it is, I think, an important learning, part of their learning process. So I think, as Jennifer does, maybe both in RVT education, that immediate supervision is something reasonable with the controlled drugs, though I do agree without background checks and things, and I'm honestly not sure what different schools require for their students to start their programs.
I agree. I don't have strong feelings about the compounding, but the administering the controlled substances, that is a big part of their learning experience, and I wouldn't want to take that away from them.
Tara, what do you think about immediate supervision, adding that?
Well, I see the benefit of educating students in administering controlled substances, but right now we don't have a definition of immediate supervision under the regulation. So we've got direct and indirect definitions. So we may need to figure out some regulations to insert a definition for immediate supervision, or you could say that they could only administer controlled substances in the presence of a supervising RVT or veterinarian.
I like that. I think if we could do that, that would be great, because now that I think about it, that's one of the main tasks that they do, that RVTs do, is anesthesia. So
Is it even necessary to do anything more related to that specifically, though? Because 4841.1 already says acting under direct supervision of the veterinarian, so they would still be able to administer medications as written.
That's correct, but direct is just in the building. So, we're just concerned about drug diversion, at the federal level, at the state level. So, that student administering controlled substances in the immediate presence of someone else who is licensed, I think, helps to put that belt and suspenders on diversion oversight.
I don't see in the room, do we have CARVTA on the meeting, maybe on the WebEx? I'd love to hear their input.
Yeah, we can sure move to public comment if there's any public comment in the room. Looking at the wording of 4841.1. Dr. Miller?
Thank you, Grant Miller, CVMA. I was just trying to find, I know we have immediate supervision in our act, I think it's in statute and it's in relation to veterinary students. And I was just trying to find it. And my understanding was that, and I could be wrong here, but the word immediate was very well, like, universally understood to mean that they're right there. And so maybe we need to define it, maybe we don't, because it does already exist in statute in relation to, I think it has to do with veterinary students doing surgery in private practice. It's under the immediate supervision of the veterinarian. I also wonder whether or not, if we were to do immediate supervision, if it could be under either a licensed veterinarian or an RVT in 4841.1. Is that the only section we're commenting on now? Yes.
I think we're commenting on the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I think it's
On
fine
the
to
whole
comment on
thing.
the whole
Yeah.
thing. Sorry, I did say 4841.1, but.
Well, I'll pause there. Do you
Take your
remember
comment.
where immediate is in the actual statute?
I'm struggling to recall a reference.
It was in 4830, sorry. DPC 4830.
Thank you. So it says a student of a veterinary medical program accredited by the AVMA who participates as part of the student's formal curriculum in the diagnosis and treatment with direct supervision by a veterinarian or in surgery with immediate supervision by a California licensed veterinarian, provided all of the following. So we have in our law already this undefined immediate, but the understanding was that immediate can only mean one thing, that they're right there. So I just wonder if we would need to go that far to define it in regs.
I'm okay with using immediate supervision as long as there's, I mean, because this is a statute.
Right.
It's not regs, so we wouldn't have to otherwise try to, clarify. But, the question is really, do you want exception language for administration of controlled substances under immediate supervision? I think it probably is a good thing to require immediate supervision of an RVT or licensed veterinarian, because otherwise it's just direct veterinarian, the veterinarian's in the building. That doesn't quite get us where we want to be with controlled substances and potentially for drug compounding. I don't know that I heard a disagreement with exempting that completely. So not authorizing RVT students to compound drugs. I'm seeking clarification from the members.
I think it's actually an important skill if we're asking them to do it in the clinic as well. So perhaps we can put them both under immediate supervision.
I would have no problem with immediate.
Well, would that be immediate veterinarian supervision for drug compounding?
Can I pause for a second, because we went to public comment, but then we didn't take other public comment, and then we started a discussion again. So if we can go back to finishing public comment and then have the discussion.
I'll probably just hold my public comment on the other sections until we get there.
Sounds good, thank you. Can we open up online public comment then? So we'll just be discussing the 4841.1 regarding supervision for, looks like controlled drug substances and compounding.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. It looks like we do have a couple requests for comment, so I'm going to go in the order that they were received. First, I have Lori Aldretti, and then Lori, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device. All right, and you are unmuted. Lori, I see that your microphone is unmuted, but unfortunately I'm not hearing any audio. If you could either try to make sure that your connection is selecting the right microphone for WebEx, or what you can do is you can connect your phone's audio by going up to audio and video up at the top of your WebEx screen, go to switch audio, and then follow the call-in prompt. I'm going to go to our next individual, and then I'll circle back with you. All right, so while we're waiting for Lori's audio, we have Bonnie Lutz, and Bonnie, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
For giving me the time to comment on this. I do a lot of consulting with large corporate veterinary owners, so.
We can't hear her.
Very muffled.
I apologize,
Sorry.
Bonnie. Do you mind getting closer to your microphone? You're a little quiet.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm not usually
much better.
quiet. That's those of you who know me. I'm not usually quiet. Okay, so I've reviewed all the practice acts in the country, and several of them do have the definitions for immediate supervision, and they do vary, which is interesting. So I would just recommend that you would add that definition to the regulation 2034, just to avoid any confusion, in case, immediate isn't clear as a bell to most people, because you've got 2034, and it seems like it wouldn't be too difficult to add immediate supervision to that regulation. That would be my one recommendation. Thank you.
I apologize. I'm speaking while I was muted. This is the moderator. Our next individual is Anita Levy Hudson. And Anita, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Of CARVDA. As always, thank you so much for allowing public input on these discussions. It's very valuable. I just wanted to say that when we're discussing this, we're definitely considering the consumer protection standpoint, which is excellent. And we're talking about RBT students. So there's a difference. I know legally there's not a difference between RBT student and assistant, but the RBT student, if they're not able to actually go through the official motions with supervision, then that's a kind of an unfairness given to them on their instruction. Now, I know they have it in school, but typically in practice, this action would be overseen by the veterinarian or an RBT. And I think that it is beneficial to continue to do that, even though it may be just a small action. I think someone mentioned like watching how the breath is affected, et cetera. But the nerves that are there when you're doing this for real, independently on your own for the first time, warrant the supervision anyway. So I do think they should still be, I do want to say that we would like to see them still able to do this, regardless of the supervision that is given, whether it be a licensed individual, whether a veterinarian or an RVT. Thank you.
Anita, just for clarification, you are speaking of both the compounding and the controlled substance?
I am. I don't think it's harmful. I don't think it's harmful to have supervision with these actions, which just sounds like what you're leaning towards. But I do think actually going through the motions of completing these actions is very important from the standpoint of when you're a student. Sometimes that you just really need to fill in the blanks, and we learn not just visually or auditorily, but also as we're doing. So I wouldn't want to see that that opportunity go away.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is the moderator. I also have a request for comment from Nancy Eierlich. And Nancy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I want to agree with everything that Anita just said. We're both representing the California RVT Association, and it's critical. Controlled substances are among the most dangerous drugs that we administer to animals, and it's critical that the students are given the opportunity to learn how to do it appropriately in school. And as terms of compounding, that is rather complicated, and it's certainly something that should be taught in school. And I agree that immediate supervision is a good idea. And putting the definition of immediate supervision in the regulations would make it simpler, and perhaps it would be used in other circumstances as well. So I do support this concept as long as we do allow the students, to do this in school under immediate supervision, both giving controlled substances and compounding.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, this is the moderator, and it looks like Lori was able to switch her audio. So Lori, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Can you hear me through the phone?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, great. Actually, I apologize. When you have an opportunity, I would actually like to comment back on an earlier item talking about the reciprocity and the experience of out-of-state students and enabling them to become licensed in California, specifically relative to the alternate route, and whether that experience from another state can be signed off as qualifying for their clinical experience combined with the alternate route education. We get that question from out-of-state students as to whether they have to have the 2 years of experience or the 4,416 hours of experience from a California licensed veterinarian. And actually your task list allows for signature of another state licensed veterinarian. So I just wanted some clarity of that, and as to whether you were going to codify that into your requirements, regulatory requirements as well. And those were my comments or question. Could you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Here. All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Jessica, I think you have a comment for Lori.
No, I don't for the public comment, but I just wanted to, it looks like I was looking at the posted materials, and on page 8 of 9 and 4842, it looks like there was a section that's posted that it highlights it's obsolete, no longer, and there's no longer an application for examination, but the actual text, you can't see it. So I pulled up the Word document just to let you guys know. So that full section, it reads, the board may deny a registered veterinary technician application. And then the part that's being struck is to take a written and practical examination for registration as a registered veterinary technician. That part is stricken because it no longer applies. But then the rest of that sentence would read, if the applicant has done any of the following, and then it goes into A. So the sentence would complete sentence for 4842 in the beginning. It says the board may deny a registered veterinary technician application if the applicant has done any of the following. So then that sentence makes more sense. So So Tim, what's struck is to take a written and practical examination for registration as a registered veterinary technician. That whole part is struck in the ledge proposal. It's in the Word document of the meeting folder. Yep. Thank you, Tim. So that's it just doesn't show that on the posted material, so I wanted to make sure you guys understood. I can go back to the rest of the.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so do we have any further comments on this part from anyone in the committee, Jennifer?
So I think I'm in the minority because I was comfortable with direct supervision with the way it's written. I'm not concerned about what's going on in the schools. It's when they're at their sites. But with the direct supervision, even if I'm the RVT immediately supervising the student, I'm still under the supervision of the veterinarian who's there. Maybe they're in the surgery suite as we're knocking down the next patient. So I was still comfortable with it the way it was written, but it looks like we're maybe leaning toward adding immediate supervision. So can we take the definition of immediate supervision that we just found and maybe add that to this and just be clean?
Yeah, I think they have to add it to regulations. Maybe that was Ms. Lutz's recommendation, but Dr. Grant didn't think we did. So can we add a paragraph in 4841.1 that states specifically regarding controlled substances and compounded medications that it would be in immediate supervision, and then work on maybe for the next meeting a definition of immediate supervision and regulations, because this is a legislative proposal, so if the board approves that, it's not going to be, when is it going to be seen in the legislature?
That depends. So if the board does approve this ledge proposal, we can try to get it into the Omni Bill where we already have suggestions there. If that's not successful, we can add it in as part of our sunset bill. But then regulations wouldn't even start being promulgated until after that legislation becomes effective.
And really right now, though, we could use the term immediate based on the fact that we have that defined elsewhere, so we don't necessarily have to be too concerned. I mean, we maybe have to keep that on our radar and decide whether we want to, maybe that's something the board can decide tomorrow about whether that needs to be, we want to work on a regulation for defining that or not, but we can put the term immediate in here now and send that to the board.
So are we then thinking of changing the word direct under 4841.1 to immediate supervision of a California licensed veterinarian or registered veterinary technician?
I don't think so, because it's really specific just for the controlled substances, because otherwise everything would need to be under immediate supervision. So there would need to be another segment, and Kara, I'm looking at you, hoping.
Yeah, she's asking if you guys want to go to lunch and then we'll work on language.
I like that.
Sorry, we were doing so well time-wise. I'm like, we'll keep going.
Do you think that maybe we should go through the rest of it before lunch and then get public comment, and then if there's anything else that needs to be worked on?
I think that's a great idea, Dr. Bradbury. All right, so we have taken comments through the 41.1, and then,
so Tara actually pointed out there's another part, and I apologize for the posted materials, that when it converted, it left off some language. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down to 48, is it 41? Yeah, 41.5D. There was also a portion that was not showing on the online portion, so that's the text that you'd be looking at.
And I'd like to point out that paragraph 2 under this subsection D, or subdivision D, indicates clarity in that an RVT licensed in another state could qualify for California licensure by successfully completing 4,416 hours under the direct supervision of a veterinarian licensed in another state, district, or territory of the U.S. or Canada. So it would not be California veterinarian specific.
Thank you for doing that. I was going to bring that up or ask where that was. Thank you.
So we're kind of jumping around a little bit. I know that we got public comment on 4841.1. I'm not sure that we got public comment on 4841.4 and following.
Do we want to do all public comment?
Yes, why don't we take all public comment for this proposal? Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Grant Miller, CVMA. My public comment is in relation to 4841.5 and 4841.5 in the opening clause, and then in section D, which I realize was somewhat redacted in our printed materials, but I think the comment will remain the same. The comment is in relation to the applicant furnishing satisfactory evidence of one of the following. That triggered something. It reminded me of a change that we are trying to make in SB 887, which is an omnibus bill relating to veterinary applicants. And basically the understanding that I have, which was non-controversial, was that the board wanted to retain some ability to electronically confirm or directly confer with the state, Canadian province, or United States territory in which the applicant currently holds a license. So I'm wondering if this committee would like to consider adding some language in there in a provision to give the board authority to directly contact these states, because at this point it hinges on the applicant submitting it, both in the opening clause and in D, where it says they will submit proof of the following. Does the board want similar ability that we're writing into 887 as we speak to independently confirm their eligibility? Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. I mean, we've run into that problem with veterinary licenses, and
yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
I have the 887 language here. It's written into 4846B in SB 887. Non-controversial. We've already discussed it. It's been approved by the board. No one had problems with it. It just gave the board statutory authority to independently connect with the state or U.S. territory or Canadian province or all those fun places where these people come from to verify their eligibility.
Yeah, and to clarify, it doesn't give us authority. We already had the authority, but it was to clarify that we could do that because there was confusion with it. But I do think that would be a good thing to point out, but perhaps when we break for lunch, we can look at how to word that in there.
Okay, and then one other comment or request. If you have an intention to define immediate supervision isn't defined in our law, it's just referenced in our law. But if you have an intention to define it, my request would be that you do that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Any other public comment from the room? Don't see any. Moderator, can we please open this for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it looks like we have a couple requests, so I'm going to go in the order that they were received. First, I have Bonnie Lutz. And Bonnie, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Okay, I just wanted to give a suggestion about the definition of immediate supervision, just to kind of have something to think about. The Texas Occupations Code defines immediate supervision as supervision by a person who is within audible and visual range of both the animal patient and the person under supervision. So that, of all the ones that I've read, that one I like the best, frankly, because it doesn't add all kinds of other details to it that make it almost impossible to comply with. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next individual is Nancy Eierlich. Nancy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I just wanted to comment that you have the 24 month restriction on the out-of-state RVT. And I believe we're removing that for the California applicants, so I would suggest that you want to remove it from this too.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, and this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, if that is the end of the public comments for now, is it a reasonable time to look at some of that language over lunchtime and have break for lunch? It's 12:28 now. Do we want 45 minutes for lunch? An hour? Let's 1:30. Go till 1:30?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we'll break till 1:30 then for lunch.
That works.
Hello and welcome back. So we are talking about the RVT school program approvals, and Jessica and Tara did some wordsmithing over lunchtime.
So before we get started, if we could just confirm that Dr. Lazarev and Dr. Sequoia are back on with us. Dr. Lazarev, if you don't mind just speaking that you're present, and then see if Dr. Sequoia, I don't see her on right now. Are either one of you back with us? Oh, there's Dr. Sequoia. Dr. Lazarev? If you're speaking, you're muted. Okay. So we can continue since we still have a quorum, but we do have Dr. Sequoia is back. So with that, Tim, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, and we'll display the changes that we've made based on the discussions. So the first one is under 4841.1. We struck where it said board approved, because as a reminder, the subcommittee is recommending that there's not a requirement for the schools, the programs to be board approved. And then the substantive change is after the strikeout to 4848, and now reads, accepts that such students shall only administer controlled substances and perform drug compounding under immediate supervision of a registered veterinary technician or California licensed veterinarian. For purposes of this section, immediate supervision means supervision by a person who is within audible and visual range of both the animal patient and the person being supervised.
Good.
The next change is on the following page. And the sentence would now read, proof of graduation shall be confirmed through electronic means or direct submission from the college, other post-secondary institution, or American Association of Veterinary State Boards. A similar change was made to section C, where it says the certificate of education equivalence shall be confirmed through electronic means or direct submission from the American Association of Veterinary State Boards. Similar change under new section D1. We added a sentence that says license verification, including any disciplinary or enforcement history, shall be confirmed through electronic means or direct submission it should be the licensing entity. And then in D2, we are recommending striking completed in no less than 24 months. The public comment that we received was regarding the rulemaking the board had approved to strike the expiration of experience and education within 5 years. Using the similar logic, we would not want to expire the clinical experience that someone has already received. And so we would strike the completed in no less than 24 months. So I think that those 3 changes, or 4 changes, the ones that we just went over, all those changes, I think addresses the discussions that the MDC has had and the public comment that the MDC received.
So just a question on that part under number 1, the license verification, including disciplinary enforcement. Is that in reference to what Dr. Miller asked us for the veterinary? So that's similar to wording?
Yes,
for the, okay.
And we use the same logic when it comes to the prior sections as well. When you look at 4841.5A in red, and then in C in red, it's the same concept that it's confirmed through electronic means or direct submission. Sarah, did you have something to add?
All right, so one thing to add is these revisions would provide for drug compounding by an RVT student. We will need to have a follow-up legislative proposal to amend Business and Professions Code Section 4826.5, which is the statute that authorizes a California licensed veterinarian or RVT to compound drugs for animal use. That section was not agendized to be amended at this meeting, so we'll need to follow up at another meeting for that revision.
This looks good. Thank you. Can I make a motion, or is there?
Yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to recommend to the board the legislative proposal to amend BPC sections 4841.1, 4841.4, 4841.5, and 4842, and repeal sections 4842.1 and 4843 regarding RVT registration requirements and RVT school or degree program approvals as amended here today.
Second.
I have a question. This is
Great.
Dr.
Now we have a
Sequoia.
motion. Any further comments from anyone on the committee?
Yes. Can you hear me? Good.
Dr. Sequoia.
This is Dr. Sequoia, and my question is, since you struck the 24 months on the hours.
Yes.
And you said other states have put a 5-year cap on. Are you uncapped, or are you putting a 5-year cap on?
So it was a little challenging to make out what you were saying, Dr. Sequoia, because you were breaking up, but I think you were asking for clarification about the 5-year cap. So I was referring to a prior rulemaking package where the board had approved, based on and also the MDC recommended as well, to strike the expiration of there's a 5-year expiration for education and a 5-year expiration for experience, and the board already approved striking that limit. And so using the same logic that you shouldn't expire education or experience that one acquires, there would be a similar thought process.
Okay, I'm still confused because
we can't hear you. If you're speaking, I think you're muted.
I'm not muted.
Oh, you're breaking up quite a bit. Are you able to?
Okay, just forget it. I don't know what the problem is. Just go ahead.
If you turn off your camera, sometimes it allows you to speak, and it doesn't interfere. Do you want to try turning off your camera and talking? Do you mind?
Can you hear me better? Can you hear me better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent. Okay. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we talked about in the subcommittee on expert witnesses, we were not going to leave it open-ended that if they had subject matter experience that was 20 years ago, that was acceptable. So following that logic, we would still need to put a cap on successful completion of both education and clinical experience, and I think 5 years is reasonable. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So I think our thinking by removing it is once you have the education component, that really doesn't expire. I'm not exactly sure why we had that in there originally, but you took the courses, you passed them. This is entry level we're talking about. The same thing with the work experience. Where it comes to disciplinary cases, I think that's a whole different level, and their recent experience on technical issues is a little bit more critical. So I don't think there's a close comparison there. At least I don't see it.
Okay, I understand your reasoning. I guess my question then would be, if somebody's are you going to ask if they've been out for 10 years that they've been doing CE to keep current or practicing in the field?
This is all just for, this is clinical practice, but for someone licensed in another state, correct? Correct. Because if we had a time limit on it, they could have gotten all their, experience many years ago, but they still have to be licensed in another state to be part of this, yeah?
So we'll be relying on the other state for CE requirements, is that correct?
So this is specifically related to the clinical practice that they were receiving. And so in line with the logic that the board had applied with expiring education and experience in order to qualify for a registration, the biggest issue that was happening, one, it's not equivalent to what we're doing for veterinarians. We don't expire their education or clinical practice experience. There's no real consumer protection benefit to expiring that education and experience. And also, it was making it a really big burden for the applicants and also our staff, because if they do the 4,000, for example, the 4,416 hours, maybe they did it in blocks of time, and you could have 1 hour fall off because it hit that 24 months, and then they would have to redo it again, and it would be just a continuous cycle, which is what was happening with the education experience prior to. So the education maybe a course would be too old because it just met that threshold, so then they would have to go back and take the education again, and then our staff would have to re-verify, and it was just a logistical nightmare, very costly for the applicants, and there was really no consumer protection benefit to expiring the education and experience that they've already received.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Fair.
I think we need to make an amendment to the motion to add revise the text that we have before us. I'm looking at paragraph 1. It starts off with an active and unrestricted license, certificate, or registration. And I think for clarity's sake, the last sentence right now says license verification. I think we need to add license, certificate, or registration.
I so move that amendment.
I second.
So wait. We had Dr. Bradbury and Dr. Sullivan already make the motion, so it'd be if Dr. Bradbury accepts the amendment, and then if Dr. Sullivan then accepts it as well.
I accept.
Yes.
Okay.
Comma, registration, or registration.
You see that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move to any public comments from those in the room. Seeing none, moderator, can we please open this for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And we have a request from Nancy Eierlich. Nancy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi there. I just wanted to let you know that the in no less than 24 months is the opposite of what you think it is. It was put in there to prevent a candidate from working 24 hours a day to achieve the 4,416 hours, not to limit the number of months that they could do it in. So in other words, no fewer than 24 months. So you had to take at least 24 months to get the 4,416 hours. I have no problem with eliminating it. I just want you to understand why it was put in there in the first place.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, with that, if we can take a vote on this motion.
Ms. Chaffelt?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury? Dr. Lazarchuk?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Usry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so then on to agenda item number 7, update and discussion from the Complaint Process Audit Subcommittee, Drs. Bradbury and Sequoia.
Great, thank you. I wanted just to start, I'm not sure if all of you are aware, but one of our veteran subject matter experts, Dr. Lane Johnson, recently passed away at home. This unexpected news has really impacted our enforcement team and the staff at the VMB, as he's played really such a big role for our board. Dr. Johnson devoted countless hours of his personal time over the last 12 years to the board. He started with the board as an in-house consultant and an inspector in 2011 and became a subject matter expert shortly thereafter. Over the years, Dr. Johnson trained numerous board staff, inspectors, and subject matter experts. He provided solid expert testimony in formal disciplinary hearings and provided guidance to those who had not yet testified. Dr. Johnson was our go-to person for quick responses, reviews, and guidance. Additionally, he served on the board's Wellness Evaluation Committee for 9 years, helping veterinarians struggling with addiction rehabilitation and maintaining sobriety. Dr. Johnson also served as a staff veterinarian at UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, where he instructed a variety of small and large animal clinical courses, oversaw the live animals used for teaching at the school, and taught the jurisprudence course to all third-year veterinary students. In addition, he provided all the regulatory content for the temporary licensing curriculum course that was administered by the School of Veterinary Medicine to all new faculty and house officers who required California licensing for their UC Davis positions. As a member of the Complaint Process Audit Subcommittee, I am glad that I had the opportunity to personally work directly with Dr. Johnson when I had questions about some of the cases I reviewed. He was always willing to get on the phone and talk and answer any questions I had. He was also a really big part of our last subject matter expert training, providing commentary and insight to our newer subject matter experts. His passing is a huge loss to our profession and community, and my condolences go out to his family and friends. And I feel like he just really was such a big part of our enforcement team, and as I mentioned, he's definitely going to be missed. So our update, the main thing that occurred between the last meeting and now is the subject matter expert training. This is our first quarterly subject matter expert training event. We did have one last year, but we've decided to have quarterly meetings. This was a more kind of informal format, and I feel like it went really well. Our experts asked general case questions. We discussed the review procedures, and they were kind of able to get to know one another, which I felt really fostered camaraderie and a supportive environment moving forward. And we really are trying to retain subject matter experts as well as have the best experts we can. And so I think this meeting really was a big step towards that. I've written in the notes here, we've written in the notes that a lot of the details about the training, and I won't go into all of them here, but I will say that some of the highlights were when our DAG liaison, Karen Denver, provided some input from the Attorney General's office. She said that multiple people reported that the VMB experts and the cases going to them and the reports were markedly improved. She just was very, had nothing but positive things to say, which I think the experts needed to hear. I think that prior to this, they felt like they were sort of operating almost in a vacuum, and they, even though we were providing some feedback on cases, it's so like it isn't an immediate feedback, and I think veterinarians, we're all pretty critical of ourselves, and we all think we're not doing a good job unless someone tells us we are. It's sort of inherent in our field for many of us. So I think that this was really needed, and the positive feedback was very welcome. She also went over some testifying, some concerns around testifying. We talked about what they can expect during an administrative hearing, and I think one of the things we'll focus on in a future meeting will be how they testify and maybe some mock trials. And then she did ask that perhaps experts could provide like a definition section in their reports. There was some other topics that were covered, again, listed here. Some examples are how to approach a violation involving a subsequent treating veterinarian that's not mentioned in the complaint, items that should or shouldn't be included in the report, one of the biggest things I thought was a way to organize how an expert might approach a case. The newer experts sort of were kind of doing it in various orders, and some of the more veteran experts suggested that they don't read the complaint. Instead, they review the records first, which I thought was a really great recommendation, so that they just had a very objective view of the case to start. And so it was comments and ideas like that I think were invaluable and really helpful to the experts. Really, it was the interaction between the green experts and the seasoned experts, including Dr. Johnson, that were really great to watch. It was more them talking amongst each other than really us presenting much, and we were just there kind of as support and to answer questions that they had about like our survey that we did. But they really had kind of a mentoring session more than anything. We are scheduled for another training in May. This one will be a little bit more formal and structured with a few short presentations, which I'm not sure what the topics of those are going to be, but we will have some presentations for them. So that I thought was a big success. We did not perform any case reviews this time around due to a lack of final discipline. And then we have, moving forward, as part of our strategic plan, we have in the third quarter of 2023 is when we have targeted this. The subcommittee will begin examining the effectiveness of the board's complaint prioritization, which is defined in a BPC code 4875.1. As we previously reported, there are a high number of complaints alleging death or serious harm, which is to take priority, but there's just so many complaints alleging death or serious harm. So a significant portion of complaints fall into that highest priority category, and it makes triaging a lot more difficult. To properly analyze the effectiveness of this priority system, we're going to reach out to other boards to see how they prioritize complaints to see if there are any statutory changes needed. And then this is probably the most exciting thing to report in my mind because of our case backlog is the addition of consultants and Dr. Sullivan, who are going to be reviewing the cases to see if they need to move forward with an expert review or if they can be closed or closed with education. If the consultant finds no violation or minor record-keeping issues, they'll write a full report for the analyst to close without moving to an expert. But if the consultant sees that the case involves a potential standard of care deviation, they'll advise the analyst that it needs to go to an expert for review. So I know this has already started. Do you have any updates, like any numbers or?
I don't have exact numbers right now. All I do know is that it does seem to be working. I think in a matter of a couple weeks, we got several cases closed that otherwise would have still been waiting. To clarify, we didn't want to create another bottleneck of experts, of them waiting to go to consultant before they go to experts, because we had so many already in queue. And so we were really strategic to determine which ones would go to consultants, because the other ones are still being reviewed by our subject matter experts. But we also wanted to make sure that if we have cases that had not gone to a subject matter expert yet, but the consultant hadn't been able to get to, it would still go to subject matter expert, so it's not going to hold up cases in any way. But we've been able to close quite a bit of cases just based on this process change. Oh, and I wanted to add, too, that the main difference from the consultants that we had prior to 2018 if the members who were here at the time recall, they were 2 consultants, and they would review every single case before it goes to the subject matter expert. They would do a full-on report and identify any violations that they saw, and if they were egregious, then it would go to another expert to do the similar review before it goes to the Attorney General's office. This is still, we're using more consultants, but they're not actually doing a formal write-up of any actual violations. If they just see that there's more to it, needs a subject matter expert review, that's all that they're saying. They're not identifying anything. That way we're not having conflicting reports when there's a review, but we are able to quickly close those that don't need further review.
Thank you. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments in the room.
Grant Miller, CVMA, thank you for that report. Could you elaborate on, you were mentioning the prioritization of the allegations and checking with other boards. Can you elaborate on what part of that you're thinking may need to be addressed or looked into further?
Yeah, you know, I haven't looked at this specifically yet, but my understanding is, and Jessica, you can jump in if I'm incorrect, but when we talked about this in our strategic plan, I think it's about 50% of our cases fall into the top priority right now, and we're following the code as it stands as to how to prioritize what cases, but we're trying to figure out, is there a better way to stratify these, maybe substratify, so that we can be able to address the really egregious things versus, you know, most people, I think when they're writing a complaint, it comes into serious harm or death, but maybe there's a way to stratify that further to allow for quicker addressing more egregious things more quickly and not having them all lumped into the same grouping, is my understanding of what our goal is.
Thank you. In 4875.1, the prioritization of allegations does not expressly name unlicensed or illegal activity. And if we were to be looking at, you know, maybe seeing what other boards are doing, or looking at if we wanted to somehow reorder these or or maybe make a subsection, I would be very interested in including unlicensed activity as one of the prioritizations of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Moderator, can you open it up to the public online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for your report and comments. So the next agenda item is number 8, update and discussion from the Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee. Any report, Dr. Bradbury?
I do. I just have to pull it up somewhere. There we go. Okay. So first of all, we were really excited to have Dr. Fowler with us, but we obviously don't have him anymore, but he was part of our call. So in March, Jessica, Dr. Fowler, and I had a virtual meeting with Dr. Brady. Dr. Sean Brady is working on drafting the new regulations for the California animal blood banking requirements. He wanted to meet just to discuss how we were going to work together and what role we were going to play. The CDFA is going to be handling the vast majority of the oversight with the VMB pretty much solely responsible for registering premises. And we wanted to be aligned, and so we just had a kind of a brief discussion. During that, he mentioned that he was going to have a webinar on the California Animal Blood Banking requirements for the CVMA members. So they had that in the first week of April, which he shared with us via email afterwards. And that did generate a few additional questions that I thought I would bring to the group today to discuss. So some of the questions that came from the webinar, one is, and I'm just going to read them directly from his email, a veterinarian or community blood bank operating under this article shall not provide payment to a person who provides an animal for the purpose of donating that animal's blood component products for use in their practice or for the resale and distribution. So this is what the code states. And in section, this is 4920.3, in section B, it says for purposes of this section, payment means the transfer to any person of money or other valuable considerations that can be converted to money by the recipient. For purposes of this section, payment does not include fees for veterinary tests, medications, vaccinations, screenings, or other services that benefit the health of the animal from which the blood or blood component products were taken. So the questions related to that are, can you offer credit on the hospital account for future use of the services? And his interpretation was that it would be okay, as it would directly benefit the health of the animal. I think that is my interpretation too. And then, can they receive dog food credit? And can a donor owners be given a gift item such as a bandana or a jar of jam? So I think before I go into the other question, I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
So just a couple things. I think that what may be helpful is the Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee create like an FAQ that kind of helps with these questions. But we did reach out. We wanted Tara's opinion too about the answers to that. As far as offering credit on the hospital account for future use of services, we agree with the interpretation. That would be okay. As it could directly benefit the health of the animal. However, dog food credit, there's a concern there because Business and Professions Code section 4920.3B exempts other services that benefit the health of the animal. And although dog food benefits the health of the animal, it's not a service and could be converted to money. Thus, dog food and other items given to the dog owner could be forms of payment.
Okay.
And then regarding the bandanas, I think if the gifts are being given out to everyone, regardless whether they have an animal donating blood, it would not be considered payment to a person who provides an animal for the purpose of donating. But if the gift is given for the purpose of donating, it could be construed as a form of payment. And the gift would be prohibited.
Darn.
But if they provide to everybody, then it's not for donating.
Yeah, I think I remember the blood bank program at Colorado State when we were doing it. We always would put a bandana on, and it was like their badge of honor, you know, like I donated. So, okay. Great. Okay, so then the second main question is interesting. Is a transfer within a corporation considered a sale or use of the product in the same practice? And the example given was, for example, a corporate hospital in San Diego transferring their blood to a hospital in Los Angeles without having to register or do quarterly reporting. And then they said this may be an issue we need to clarify in regulation, but I think the VMB and CDFA should be aligned in our approach.
So we don't have a response to that question specifically, but I'm not hearing where there would be a sell from one hospital to another, because unless, are they selling one location to another?
I don't know that they're selling it, but they might be transferring inventory. I don't know how that.
Yeah, I think we may have to look at, I'm not hearing anything that would
Mm-hmm.
qualify that as commercial, because it's still their own patients, right? But I think we need to look into it a little more.
Okay.
I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd want to look into this because, you know, we have said pretty firmly that veterinary premises registration cannot be transferred, and it does not cover additional locations within a corporation. But the blood banking registrations are different, so I think we would need to research and report back.
Maybe we can have another call this quarter with Dr. Brady and just discuss that, since it's both of.
Because the question is what triggers it to become the commercial that needs to register with CDFA. And so we'll just have to look at it. But I think that this could be part of the creating FAQs to help the general population understand what the requirements are.
I did have a question, and I should know this, I apologize, but when are we going to establish the fee system for the premise registration?
So right now, we didn't set a fee because there wasn't any idea of, one, how much it would cost to implement, how many are going to be operating throughout California. And so in order to implement the bill right now, we're just requesting as part of the premises registration, either the application or renewal, they're identifying whether or not they are operating a blood bank, and in that we can start tracking numbers on it. Right now, there hasn't been a real fiscal impact to the board by simply just adding it onto the existing registration, where when we were first coming up with the fiscal, we thought it was going to have to be its own separate registration. But because we were able to streamline that process to make it go with the existing premises registration, there wasn't a huge cost there. We still don't know how many are operating. We're establishing a baseline right now because we have the authority to charge a fee that's reasonable that covers the cost of it. But right now, there's still not a huge cost to it. So as you remember, we got a general fund loan to cover the costs and to do get an AGPA to help write regulations for that fee. But since we don't have that yet, we haven't used any of that money, so
Okay.
it's still sitting in the fund. We may not need to use the money if we're able to do it in an efficient way without incurring additional costs, but it's still something that we're tracking closely to see when we do it.
Okay, I think, I guess in our discussion, nobody had applied yet to the CDFA for this. So we'll see if there's some interest after the webinars. But I think when that will become an issue is if people are specifically opening up community blood banks that are not veterinary premises.
So if they're opening up blood banks that are not veterinary premises, that would not be something that we even would charge a fee for because they don't register with us. So it would just be those who are operating a blood bank within their premises that we would decide whether or not to attach a fee to.
Okay. Sorry that I am not 100% clear on that. That was a pretty large bill when that was going through, and it was there's a lot of information. I think the only other thing that came up in the phone call was that I brought up some questions that had come up in some discussions I had with stakeholders, just in passing about making sure that in the recommendations there was something about freezing and storing an aliquot of serum from each donor at every blood draw so that it can be tested at a later date should the patient or recipient develop an infectious disease, and then also a system to trace back who bought blood from a blood donor who might later test positive if the blood bank isn't testing every sample. And Dr. Brady said that he would address those. So anyway, it's a really good collaborative effort, and I look forward to whomever joins me on the subcommittee. So I guess any comments from the public?
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. I was just trying to look up the bill because I actually do think that every community blood bank needs to register both with the Veterinary Medical Board and the CDFA. CDFA handles the product side, but the VMB handles the procedure side and the facilities.
Correct. Sorry, so to clarify, I was referring to the situation Dr. Brady brought up is if they are not drawing the blood at the facility, so if they there's a premises registration that the veterinarians are drawing the blood, but then the blood goes to a separate facility that then does all of the processing, they're the ones that are not registered with us.
That's correct. Understood.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I actually was asking about somebody who would be drawing the blood and just opening up a facility solely to. Yeah, and so if they weren't already a veterinary hospital, and all they were doing was collecting and producing blood from community sources, that would be another.
There's still a registered premises permit because blood collection is now within the practice of veterinary medicine.
So you'd have to have, you basically would have to fit all of the minimum.
It's just a special
standards.
Section.
You would have, again, dual jurisdiction, CDFA and the board.
Yeah, I'm not sure the minimum standards, I'm not sure 2030 proper would necessarily be what we would use for that. There may have to be a different regulation depending on if there is one that shows up that way. If it's an existing vet practice, it's easy because it's 2030 plus all the requirements specific in this big bill to the blood collection. But if it's just one that's just doing that, it's probably going to need a little bit more attention from this board.
Alternate premises.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in my eyes, I could see people like wanting to do that. But so that was where I was like, what we would want to have a fee for that, but we would also need to promulgate regulations.
Yes. I just wanted to also mention the CVMA will be offering a second webinar from Dr. Brady on April 26th in the evening, and they've been fairly well attended. We also are launching a blood banking resources, a public resource on our website in May, and that will include an article by Dr. Brady that we're publishing in our magazine coming up in the next edition, and then as soon as that edition's out, we'll launch the website that will have not only the laws and regulations, but also the articles. And we also are recording that webinar for use in a library in the future so that if somebody wants to come and watch that video, watch that lecture on at least the regulatory side of it, we have that available as a resource. We also feel like there's a need to actually kind of also help with the education relating to how you actually run a blood bank, because his talk was more about the laws and regulations and how you fit into the legal framework. But a lot of people had questions about like what refrigerators are we supposed to use and centrifuges and things like that. And so we feel like there might be another need for us to secure a speaker more like Dr. Owens or Dr. Epstein or somebody who's actually run a blood bank to actually like go through the nuts and bolts of how do you put together one of these blood banks to make it work. And so we're trying to be committed to doing our part to help educate the profession and create those resources, and it's kind of a evolution for us too. So anyway, just wanted to share those resources with you and let you know that we're working on it on our end too to try to make sure that we set our folks a sail with the right information and support.
That would be great. Thank you so much for doing that. I think that'll be really helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then I guess moderator, can you open up for public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradbury. So agenda item number 9 will be an update and discussion from the Equine Practice Subcommittee, which would be Murray and potentially with some input from Dr. Fowler.
So on March 13th, OAL approved the California Horse Racing Board's emergency filing to amend Title IV, Section 1867. The subcommittee's work is currently at a standstill until the 45-day public comment period for CHRB's proposed rulemaking on 1867 opens. Once it does, we will submit the board's public comment letter, and a copy of this letter has already been sent to CHRB as well. After that, the subcommittee can hopefully schedule a meeting with CHRB to work through any of the concerns that are raised at that time. A separate medical records subcommittee has been formed to address concerns with those requirements. We created a separate subcommittee as many of those concerns affect other alternate premises and are not necessarily specific to equine practitioners.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I've had a text exchange with Dr. Blea with his concerns about FDA CFI number 256, saying that the racetrack veterinarians, and I'm sure other equine veterinarians, are frustrated with the limit of the number of medication, compounded medications that can be used as office stock. His comments were, you know, when you're going out to the field, you really need to have that office stock in order to be able to dispense to an animal that needs it. And I just acknowledged that and said that from AVMA's perspective, they've been working with FDA for 3 years and longer. And really we're pushing for this list to be a list of those medications that were not authorized to use rather than those that can be used. That would make it a lot easier for the profession, but apparently not for FDA. So we did not get anywhere with FDA on that request, repeated requests. So, and I, you know, from what I have read and what webinars I've seen on GFI 256, I don't see any leeway on this issue. So it was good to hear from Dr. Blea.
Just to clarify, when you say we did not get far from with that request, you're talking about you as an AVMA representative, not the board or MDC representative.
Correct.
Let's take public comment. Okay, can we open the floor for any public comment on this agenda item? Dr. Miller?
So the CVMA has also been in contact with a number of practitioners, including Dr. Blea, and we have just recently submitted our first nomination of a drug to the GFI 256 inclusion list. So we're learning how to do that. We're working with the AVMA on doing it. And we're also just testing out to see how long this process is really going to take, because that was one of the concerns about this whole issue is if it's sitting at the FDA on a wait list, that's all the days that we don't have it in our hands when we need it. So we nominated DMSO topical liquid because it's being taken out of production by Zoetis, the FDA-approved manufacturer. They're no longer producing it, but it's an emergency drug for acute inflammation reduction in horses. So we submitted that request last week and started the timer, and we're going to see how it works out. But the CVMA is now doing that on behalf of the profession, at least in the state. When we hear from doctors who can't receive medications, we're trying to research whether or not they are indeed unavailable in FDA form, and then if they aren't, we are now moving forward with nominating them to the list. So just thought I'd update you on that progress.
Grant, maybe
Yes.
you know this, I was under the understanding that if it was on the wait list, it could still be compounded. But once they make a decision, then it's the decision.
That would be news to me, but that would be great news because so many of them are on the wait list. It's really, out of all the lists that they have, the wait list is actually the longest list of.
I will double check on that and I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moderator, can we please open this for online public comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. All right, then agenda item number 10 is our update and discussion from the Medical Records Keeping Subcommittee. Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Just an update. We're started on this. Actually, Dr. Fowler had given me a couple of different medical records from equine practitioners, and we had a kind of a brainstorming session scheduled on Monday, but canceled that, and we'll get on that right after, I guess, probably the first week of May, because I think that the next step in addressing the medical records, we're getting close to actually having a stakeholders meeting, a dedicated day just to address this, and we have about, Marie and I have pulled up about 11 different state records just to have a cross-section of large and small states. And her practice has provided some large animal medical records and small animal ruminants. And so I think once we take a look at that, the other area we need to look at are the human profession, medical professions, and get maybe a cross-section of a couple of those to see how they handle medical records, and then go forward with that information and hopefully get some good discussion going and have something hopefully available for midsummer to get working on. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Bradbury, comment?
I just reviewed a webinar about HISA for horse racing, and they have a whole medical records section too. So I don't know if you want to also keep that in mind moving forward.
I have that PowerPoint. It's really interesting.
I mean, also on their website, they have a whole medical record section for veterinarians.
Yes.
Yeah.
The concept is I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it is automated with a central data bank. I have heard from a couple of practitioners that I know through AVMA that they say the veterinarians in their areas are pretty frustrated with it, but it's really just at its starting point. So, but it has some real unique requirements, and it's a flow chart that you go through. It looked pretty neat to me, but there's frustrations out there with it, but they'll get it cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean, definitely with the uploading of the records, it seems like that's an issue. I guess I was thinking about when you were looking at medical records requirements, they have some specific requirements that of course are racing specific, but are, I think, just something to keep in mind as we're looking at what should be required in a and a medical record and an equine practice. I mean, these are developed by people in the field. So
Yes.
obviously, it's very, like I said, very specific. But I just was thinking about that. Thanks.
Yeah, it'll be included.
Any public comments from here in the room? Medical records? Seeing none, moderator, can you please open this for online discussion?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, next agenda item would be future agenda topics and meeting dates. I have our next meeting date for Tuesday, July 18th, and then Tuesday, October 17th. I'm not sure if we have.
So standing items we still have that the MDC can expect to come back is still the Equine Practice Subcommittee, Medical Records Subcommittee, the Complaint Prioritization Statute to reevaluate that from the Complaint Audit Subcommittee. From today, there was a recognition that we need to revisit 4826.5 related to drug compounding and RVT students. And then there was a request from the board that the MDC look at RVT pathways to registration.
Yeah, does that?
That was actually a request from Ms. Laredo to look for. So I don't know if you heard the question, but they are asking what that meant.
So it's alternate. Can you hear me? Alternate pathways such as RVTs who have a bachelor's in an animal science or related field being eligible to sit for the exam.
Okay, any other comments from the committee? Public comment? Not seeing any in the room. Moderator, can we open that for public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And the last thing on the agenda is our adjournment. Just before that, I would like to say a giant thank you to Jennifer. This is her last meeting here with us on the MDC, which is hard to believe, but thank you for all you've done for us. And we hope to keep seeing you around with your comments. Thank you. Appreciate you.